Well, I wouldn't really say it's a breakthrough, but I think they are finally honoring their pledges they have made many years ago, because we were not at 100 billion 2 months ago. So they're meeting their commitments, I would say. It's not a breakthrough, but it's a good sign.
Yeah, it's a couple of things. I mean, first, it's still important, it's like, and we have to stress this, that yes, the finance is important, it's like, so it has to be there, and often it's not yet. However, it's true that sometimes you have this, and it at least appears to have, that there's sometimes an imbalance between, there's a willingness to fund something, and a lack of preparedness on the ground to absorb it and turn it into action. So it's really important to have to channel it right, and to have the institutional structure and framework in place to make this happen. So this is it's like it starts. I mean, obviously it's a complex undertaking, but it starts with it's like engaging a multitude of actors, including local communities, including local government, to mainstream the actions needed into activities on the ground.
Yeah, so I mean, challenges, opportunities are that we see money flowing to climate projects from the private sector. We know that the private sector provides about half of the total climate finance globally, so about 300 billion last year. So seeing the private sector furthering and coming further ahead with more pledges is encouraging, but it needs to be seen also, why are they doing the pledges? What is behind their intentions? And is it only to offset their planned future emissions, or to offset their past emissions? And so it's sometimes also have to see it from both sides, and it's a good sign that more money is moving ahead, but you also have to see that it's moving in the right direction, and they are also putting in place the right strategy for their own company to reduce emissions, and not only maybe offsetting emissions by investing in nature and claiming the credits.
Carbon markets, which is one of the big themes for this COP. This is important, yes, as something between governments, so the famous Article 6 negotiations, but also between non-state actors. So and there's a lot, yes, that can be said about it's like the merits and the challenges that you have. What I personally like about the carbon market approach is that it reaches actually much more than government-to-government relations, communities, and also that I do appreciate. I mean, I'm a lawyer by training, but I do appreciate the transactional nature in the sense that it's in the sense of predictability. So it's not just it's like grant funding that may or may not, and often may not sufficiently come in, but that you can come up with a proposal and come up with actual climate action, and that gets rewarded. Now, if the price is right, that people are willing to pay, especially for nature-based solutions, I'm it's like a priori all in for it.
I give you an example of two completely different mechanisms. One is the work that the NGOs do on the ground. I mean, they are so close to the ultimate beneficiaries, to the communities, and giving them also funding to do their work over longer periods of time is very valuable. On the full other end of the spectrum, I think also the capital markets, especially the bonds, the debt capital markets are promising, because they are able to channel funding from institutional investors, pension funds, insurances, reinsurances into projects that can then further also reduce greenhouse gas emissions or bring an adaptation benefit. So two different spectrums, but two instruments to watch in terms of how they can be scaled up.
Look, I mean, we finally need something that is operational at the level that only technical details need to be solved. So I would like to see that all the big political disagreements or gaps are behind us, and that we can look at, who are the institutions now at the technical level who can help us with setting up methodologies, thinking more about standard structures, and how to roll out better in order to move ahead. I also, and that's just something, if you think of nature-based solutions, obviously it's something that was a big gap in previous mechanisms, in particular under in the Kyoto framework, that there's a clear commitment to use this to boost nature-based solutions. So that's something very important that also needs to be recognized really at the regulatory level. Now, then the third thing, and there I'm more pragmatic, and I would like to see that that's almost not so much spoken about, but somehow we need clarity as how we use the voluntary carbon markets, because it's if you look around, this is right now there's so much, it's like still more talk than action about it, but it's really something important to see that the Article 6 structure is quite difficult and quite complex. Now, working all these non-state actors into the structure may not happen over over the next few years. And from now until 2030 is really the decade of action. So we really need the voluntary carbon markets. Whether they are the future or not, it's beside the point. At the moment they are there and they can be used. So we need them in order to boost investment in nature-based solutions.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and I mean we need to give also the private sector that is involved in these transactions clarity and a long-term perspective so that they can plan. So without clear procedures on the workings of Article 6, we do not have an environment for long-term planning, and we don't get them engaged as much as we would like to. So we are at the second week of the COP negotiations. It's Monday. The COP closes on Friday. I've just heard there are still 200 records in Article 6 negotiations, so there's still something to do. Well, I hope that it achieves the ambition that we were planned, that needs to be there to combat the climate emergency. So we are not in a climate change situation, it's an emergency situation. And the way Paris has been set up, every 5 years, increase your targets, increase the ambition. And I think that's the most important outcome next to finance, next to markets as well. Clarity on finance, clarity on markets is really to show that there is ambition and that there are the plans behind delivering the ambition.
I mean, this is the first time that we have an iteration of the NDCs. So, and while plenty of these NDCs have come in only late, and we still have to look more closely at this. But what I would like to hope is that there's it's like whether this is through additional action, which is not yet in the papers, whether this is through a strengthening, out of the 5-year cycle. It's like also thinking that there's a global stocktake that's not so far away from now, so there's still room for countries to move ahead, but that this be, it's like the milestone for countries to reassess what they have, and that we clearly and forcefully move well below the 2 degrees and towards the 1.5 degree scenario.